Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm here with Corena Chase. She's joining us from New York, and she is one of 4 authors. It was a team effort to write the book, The 5 Lost Superpowers. There we are. Why we lose them and how to get them back. Corena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So these 5 lost superpowers, like, what are they and how did we lose them?
That was our question. What are they and how do we lose them? Exactly. So the 5 lost superpowers are curiosity, authenticity, resilience, playfulness, and compassion. And my team, I wrote this book, as you mentioned, with a team of people that I work with at a company called the J.M. Reed Group. We do development and training. We talked about in our training, we would talk a lot about with leaders and also with experts, the power of curiosity and how curiosity could open up sort of a lens into broader topics, broader ways of thinking, especially for experts and people who are applauded and validated for their expertise in something, the need to sort of break out of the reward and validation they're getting for that expertise all the time, especially in this world as it's expanding now. We talk in this book a lot about a VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, and how this superpower of curiosity can help you open up and ask questions and look at different things and have more awe and wonder. And help sort of expand your vision, your way of thinking, poke at different things, both in terms of your leadership and just sort of what you're looking at and what you're paying attention to and how that impacts your thinking. And one of the things that we would talk a lot about when we would train and work with people on curiosity is where the heck it went, because children are wildly and wonderfully curious. There's research around the ways in which they think that shows us that they're just taking in so much different data, and the way that they're using it is so creative and imaginative. And then what happens to that? Like over time, we become less and less curious. We see objects and things around us and get more and more sort of boxed and compartmentalized about what we're supposed to do with that. The whole thing about how after Christmas, the thing that kids are playing with are the boxes, right?
Right. Yeah.
They just see if you put a kid in a room and there's no toys, but within 20 minutes, they've turned different things into toys and they've got games going and they can't step on that crack and they're imagining a pool of lava on the floor and they're jumping on the couches. So there's sort of this wonderful way of looking at the world and what's the benefit of holding on to that trait as adults? Yeah. So that made us think so we had this pandemic came along, and something that John Reed, the head of our company, been thinking about a lot is if that happens with curiosity, that's not the only thing that's happening with, right? There's these other traits and things that we are great at as kids that the world sort of strips away over time. And how can we reharness those? Another thing we would talk about a lot is playfulness. With that, we were often encouraging leaders to play a head taller and embrace their playfulness to come up with more sort of imaginative and broad solutions and ideas. So we got together and said, what else? What else are the things that we excel at and are great at and make us wonderful, make us want to be around children that also serve us really well as adults? And we sort of came up with the last 3, which were authenticity, resilience, and compassion.
Right.
And then we dug into those and sort of how they show up as children. What happens? What happens? Why do they go away? Which is, the world, middle school, our parents, the education system. And then the book is very much about how do we get them back? What are some things that we can do to re-harness these things, these wonderful things that are in us?
Yeah. No, that's right. And because I've got kids who are 4 years old, so I'm seeing all of that, right? They've got all of that in spades. I mean, not always compassion. Like kids at that age can still be like sociopathic on occasions, but they can also be extremely compassionate, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the compassion we talked about that one quite a bit. And Andrew wrote that chapter, and he's a school teacher. And he had some stories of just seeing seeing the children have compassion for each other in a way, and the teachers not having that same compassion. And one thing that we thought was really important about the compassion piece with kids is that the thing that they are less focused on is who deserves compassion, right? Because they haven't gone through the phase yet as much of othering the in groups and out groups, and the thing we go through where, okay, sure, people like us deserve compassion, but those people over there don't necessarily deserve compassion. So they're more broadly compassionate children.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, and my son, one of my sons sometimes will shame me, and he seems to be particularly strong on the compassion. And like when one of them's acted up, so even if one of my sons, they're like fraternal twins, has just hit the other one, right? And I say to the miscreant, right, you should be hitting, stop that, and say sorry, and like I'll be quite stern with the other one. Otto, who's just been hit, it's like, Daddy, let it go. It's all right. Don't worry. So that's what's fascinating.
Yeah,
so they don't have this same sense of like righteousness, right? They just see someone in pain and they want to help that person get out of their pain, like some of the time, right? They can also be cruel, but that is there, right? As a very strong trait.
I think that's a good distinction. And it is one that Andrew makes. It's that, it's not that they can't be cruel, but something happens when they see somebody in pain. The instinct is to relieve the pain in another human being. And of course, that's the wonderful thing about compassion versus something like sympathy or empathy, that it's an impulse to do something, to actually relieve pain and make it something better for another human being.
Yeah, and that was something that I like, that sharpening of the distinction of compassion in the book, which I hadn't really dwelt on too much. But compassion is defined when it gives us an impulse to actually act. And of course, that's what my son is doing in that moment. He's saying, Daddy, stop telling him off, basically, right? Just leave him alone. He doesn't like being told off. Stop doing it. Yeah.
Right. I see the way that's landing on him, and I don't like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. And sometimes, I guess those classic experiments when someone's like on the street and we just walk by. Yeah. They're quite painful to watch, aren't they? Sometimes, partly very because I sort of see myself in it, and I think, God, yeah, there's probably a few times I've walked past people in distress and just walk on by.
Because we learn about who's unconsciously, consciously, we make decisions about who's worthy of action and compassion, whether it's because of circumstances in the world or who we associate with or whatever it is, or survival. Right. The old tribal survival instinct is huge. And we don't have it as much when we're young kids.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like we're much closer to that instinct of, okay, this person is in pain. How can I get them out of pain?
Yes. Which is wonderful. Like, what a wonderful thing to get back to. Right. I mean, especially if you think about leadership and the ability to see something and do something, even if it's just have a conversation or acknowledge what you see happening. The grown-up world, the business world, it can make us so sort of, one of the themes in the book is how outcome driven we become as grown-ups, and how outcome driven we are in the business world. And that can shut down compassion. That can shut down all of it. It shuts down curiosity. It shuts down playfulness. It shuts down even authenticity, right? We're just sort of driving towards these goals and these outcomes. And what does that do to us and all of these qualities that we really benefit from?
Yeah, that's right. And what just comes to mind is a speech I remember attending early in my career called "Make the Boat Go Faster," and it was by an ex-Olympic rower. And I think he may even have written a book with that title. But basically, the idea is don't do anything if it's not making the boat go faster. Don't do it. Right? If it's not getting you to win your gold medal, just cut it out. And there's just this ruthless focus on only doing things that contributed, as you say, to the outcome. And of course, that may be absolutely the way to go win a gold medal. But what do we lose in that?
Yeah. And in organizations with a bunch of humans working together, all trying to have some sense of ownership and purpose and all of these things, right, that we know at this point very well humans want, that doesn't work. And gosh, are we seeing evidence of that right now with, I don't know if over in England they're talking about this as much as here, but this idea of the Great Resignation and all the people that are leaving their jobs. They had too much time to think over the pandemic, and they're saying, wait a minute, this is nonsense. I'm getting out of here.
Well, so that would make sense, because it is kind of interesting how, when you look at the stats that Gallup do and how many people are disengaged, what is it, over 2/3 of the workforce are disengaged, and a big proportion of them are like actively disengaged, like they're trying to sabotage their own companies.
Yeah.
It's sort of interesting that more people don't resign, right? That there is so many people in the workforce given that. But well, of course, just the need to be employed is what that tells you is how many people are working 100% so that they can bring home a paycheck to their families. Right.
And so as soon as you get any kind of flexibility or recognition and that that's not necessary, that there might be another way or path, you're out of there. And maybe that's part of what the pandemic showed people. Yeah,
maybe it's given people a bit, as you say, a bit more time to reflect, to look at other opportunities. Maybe there were opportunities in their local area they hadn't realized were available before. And I can see that.
So, and in addition to doing the training that I do with JM Reed Group, I'm an executive coach, and I work with leaders, but I also work with individual contributors and people sort of at other levels in the organization. And the wonderful thing about that is that I get to talk to people about what they're missing and what they want to be seeing in their leaders, and why they are always thinking about whether or not to stay. And it really has so much to do. And we know this. I mean, the research says this, but of course, to be in conversation with people that are really working through why it doesn't feel good to them, why it doesn't feel like enough, even though they've got a great paycheck. And it does have so much to do with wanting more, wanting to feel like they are going to be surrounded by a community of people that are curious and resilient and authentic and playful and, all of these things. So I know there's a definite business case, both to cultivating these things as a leader, but also who doesn't want to be all of these things? And who doesn't want to be around people, right, that are playful and curious and authentic? And
I suppose my experience, even with my own journey with some of that, is that even like intellectually, like I get that, those are all things that intellectually I can conceive, that I'd want more of in my life. I still often have to deal with quite a lot of my own stuff to allow that to come out, right? Like the playfulness, for example, it's like, there are just moments where I'm like, well, do I be playful here and make a joke and do something odd and like risk social opprobrium, or do I, just sort of stay still, and don't do that, right? Yeah. It's like, it can, there's a process, right? That individuals need to go through, even if the environment's conducive, to actually step into some of these ways of being.
Yeah, that's one of the things I talk about in the authenticity chapter is how do we figure that out? Like, what does that even mean? Like, who are we what are our authentic selves? And that one of the things that I think a lot of us do is define that a little bit too narrowly. At some point, we decide, okay, this is who I am, and this is how I operate in the world. And then if a situation or a person or a dynamic demands something else from us and we try to flex to that, sometimes I think we feel confused. Well, are we flexing to this environment, or am I like having to wildly go out of my comfort zone and not be authentic? And sort of argue, as Walt Whitman said, we are wide, we are large, we contain multitudes. Yes. That if we can kind of play around with the edges of who we think we are and how we usually operate, most of us will find that there's a lot more area that we can play around in, where we're still authentic. We're still being true to who we are and what we think and what we believe. And sort of being playful with those edges can help us expand our sense of authenticity and who we are. And then clearly, of course, notice when, you know what, I have been doing that, but every day I go to work and every day I'm pretending to think something is funny, and I'm pretending to like the way that person does that. And I'm pretending to value the way that we operate around here. And then of course that's something different. But if we're just, maybe just playing around with how we communicate a little bit, or maybe we'll put on some nicer clothing, or whatever it is, what's inside of us that enables us to still show up as we are.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking what comes to mind is like I've written this comedy sketch, right? That and I've got a friend who might be up for doing it, and like we're just working out like the logistics of how we might film it. But there's this huge part of me is like, oh, but I've got this like serious business podcast, that we get into philosophy and like the meaning of being human, and now what I'm just going to go do like a comedy sketch on YouTube, like. That conversation is going on in my head, and I'm sure that must go on for people who like they read books like your book, and they're like, yeah, but am I kind of ready to be authentic and playful? And like, what's going to happen? Are all my clients going to think I'm like something else now? And it's there's something about courage, right? In
for sure
stepping into these spaces and just like trusting that it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, and that you can test it a little bit. As well. I mean, of course, the process of coaching has very much to do with, oh, I want to do more of this or be more like this or try this, but I'm afraid, and then you do all these things. Well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you put this comedy sketch up on YouTube? Like, is your whole business going to crumble? Right? Or like maybe 3 potential clients are going to scratch their chins and be like, what was that about? And maybe you'll have some great answer. That was about exploring playfulness.
There you go.
Yeah,
I've got my answer. I didn't intend this to be my coaching session.
And then what's the worst thing that could happen? And a lot of times the worst thing isn't really that bad. And then if it is, like how afraid of you of that are you? And then you can kind of gauge whether or not you want to take the risk. But in most coaching processes, people come to realize that they're holding themselves back based on a lot of scenarios that are pretty unrealistic. And that there are ways to take some mini steps and test these things out and see if the world falls apart. But as you just said, all these like the research says everybody's looking for more of this. Everybody would like the people around them to be more of all of these things. More authentic, more compassionate, more playful, more resilient, right? We're all looking for these things. They feel good, they look good.
Yeah. Exactly. And of course, how do we change it? Well, the only really way we've got to change the world is changing ourselves, right? And then we give permission to everybody around us to show up differently, right? That's seems to be the secret of life at some level. Like it's all on us. And so, maybe by me doing my comedy sketch, right, then somebody else looks at that. Oh, maybe I could, do something. And that's how it works, right? And then we just create this environment that we then step into. So I'm interested. Yeah. Of the 5, or maybe there's anything else through the process of writing this book, have there been any edges that you've kind of stepped into yourself where you've needed to take yourself on and try out new behaviors or ways of being?
Well, I think, I really liked the resilience chapter because it feels like, especially in the world today, it's a thing that so many people want, right? Resilient. They feel like, I need to be resilient. I want to be more resilient. And one of the things I like about the book is that it gives you ideas for how to take these things on. And so I have the resilience chapter sort of summed up some things that I try to do anyway, but said here, these really are going to make you more resilient, like really being aware of your locus of control, and believing you have a locus of control is something Lene focuses on a lot. And that is something a lot of my clients really struggle with, right? And
what is a locus of control, just for people who, that what does that term mean?
It's what you believe you have control over and what focusing on what you have control over, but also believing that when crappy things happen, you do have some control over what that feels like. So understanding that you can respond to things differently. I mean, it's the classic thing of, this happens all the time in my street in New York. I look down in traffic, right? And there's people in their cars bopping around to the music, and there's people honking on their horns and swearing. And it's just one of those situations like it's amazing how much of you can tell about a human being, right? When the same thing is happening to a bunch of people and they're all responding differently. So recognizing that locus of control, what we have control over, what's happening externally out there that we don't have control over and don't need to feel bad and take on. And then recognizing where we do have control, to own the way that we respond to things. That's a huge part of resilience. It's daily work, and she talks about that's like, sure, there are people that are more resilient and there are more people that are just naturally better at that. But so much of what it is to be resilient is sort of focused work of thinking about what we have control over. And finding meaning is part of resilience, which is part of what we do for a living, right? Is help people find meaning in what they're doing and what's happening. This belief that everything happens for a reason can be really detrimental. What the heck does that mean? Look, if you find your own meaning in terms of why something's, how is it going to serve you? What are you going to do with it? A lot of really hard things happened to a lot of people this year, and to try to take on any universal meaning might not be as good for resilience as how is this impacting me, and what does this mean for my life, and how am I going to get meaning out of this? Which again is a kind of locus of control, sort of taking control of what's happening. Looking for the good stuff, not necessarily having like this wearing rose-colored glasses all the time, but what does it mean to be actively looking for what's happening around you that's good and positive, whether it's that this person is in your life or that you have this particular safety net, and being able to identify and focus on those things at times when you feel scared or out of control. And being vulnerable is part of resilience, being able to say, I need help. She also talks about having a tribe, right? Who are your people? Who are your people that you go to that you can count on, that know you? Talk about this in the authenticity chapter too. Like one of the great benefits of being authentic and being truly you is that you learn who responds to you. You learn who your people are. Because when you're being authentic, the people that love those qualities and things about who you are attracted to you. And then you've got your tribe. Which is also part of resilience. So that, I guess, what really spoke to me, that these things that I try to help my clients with and that I'm working on every day really are worth doing. And they're the things that create the foundation of resilience.
Right. And so what are some of the practices or habits that you've developed then that you might be able to share with people that like you found have been really valuable, but be it in let's say the resilience area or with authenticity? Mm-hmm.
There's a few I practice regularly. So for resilience, I think the locus of control thing is really important for, especially because I'm kind of a control freak. So I think many of us are, more than we realize. So it's like, all right, well, then what exactly is it that I'm trying to control? And is it serving me and my outlook and my ability to be who I want to be in the world and be the support system I'd like to be for other people? So I think a lot about that.
So that's sorry, go on. Just in terms of the questions you're asking yourself, because often, this when we're doing this sort of self-coaching, if you like, it's the questions I ask myself. So it sounds like the question you're asking yourself is, what am I controlling right here, right now? And is it serving me? Right. Is that right?
Is it serving me and who I want to be and how I want to show up?
Right. Yeah.
Because I think a lot about that, how I want to be showing up in the world, because that's what I judge myself on. If I'm going to be awful to myself later, it's going to be because I didn't show up to a situation the way I wanted to show up. I was short or cranky or didn't ask enough good questions or whatever it is. So is what I'm focused. It's like, what am I trying to control and what am I paying attention to in my time? And are those things helping me be who I want to be so that I can show up in the world the way that I want to show up?
Yeah.
And a lot of things that I'm paying attention to are not, right? So just, it's constant, right? Asking yourself these questions. And especially in today's world with this sort of the competition for attention, who's got it? Who's winning? What am I paying attention to? And what is that doing to me and my ability to show up the way that I want to show up? So that I think in the curiosity chapter, John talks about asking better questions. And I'm a coach, right? So I'm always thinking about better questions, but it's just something you can always get better and better and better at. It's kind of like, you know, how when you're a grown up, it's like the older you get, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like as a coach, it's like the longer you coach, the more you realize there's just better and better and better questions to be, you know, and habits to be built that get you in the space to be supporting somebody else's growth. So I do think that the way in which your curiosity, I think a lot about, am I staying in a state of genuine curiosity and wonder? Because that's another thing in coaching. And, you know, you can become outcome driven. Oh, you decide, you think what this person needs or what they want or what's going on with them too early. And it keeps you from being in that state of genuine curiosity. So again, you know, to your point, like, what are you doing? I mean, I guess I'm stopping myself, right? Or I'm noticing, I'm rushing to an outcome, or I have too much of an idea of what's happening. And I think a lot about a state of wonder. Stay in a state of wonder. Stay in a state of wonder. You don't know. You don't know. Enjoy that. Enjoy that you don't actually know. And if you think you know, okay, test it. So there's a sort of discipline to that.
Yeah, it's
even
almost
at a cocktail party, we can practice that, right?
Yeah. But it's almost the same thing, right? It's like, what am I trying to control? Because there's one thing you might be trying to control events and people, but also like controlling your own like mind in terms of trying to get to this outcome or that outcome, or trying to work out what the next question is. Right. That in a sense is a form of self-control that we can also let go of, it seems.
Absolutely. I guess if you kind of like dug down to the bottom of all of this, that's what we're doing, right? Is just staying aware of what's happening in our brain and how much we're trying to drive outcomes, or and just continuing to try to being mindful and stepping back and letting go and letting things happen a little bit. Not letting things happen, but deciding, making choices, all of those moments where we're making choices, but we're not conscious that we're making a choice.
Yeah.
And being more deliberate about, wait, I can make a choice about what I ask, what I do, how I respond. What do I want to do here? What's gonna be the most authentic, resilient, curious, playful way that I can respond to this moment? Yeah.
Yeah. And there's something about that, like just stepping, it's faith. That's the word that comes to me. It's just having faith that if I let go, it's going to be for the best. It's, you know, and it's, and that's something I think I'm finding more and more is that, you know, just the more I can let go and surrender to the moment. And that almost sounds cliche, doesn't it? But there really is something in it. Then this magic happens, right? That we can just let go, and and I think that pertains to all of this.
It's almost embarrassing as somebody in the training and coaching world, how often that's what you end up finding yourself saying. Well, how do we? Because people say, well, how do I do that? How do I do that? Well, you have to stop and believe that you can do something differently, and that the world's not going to fall apart. And you can call it faith or mindfulness or taking a pause or taking a breath or whichever cliche thing you've heard 1,000 times. But that is, in fact, a cliche, because you have to do that. It is the baseline thing you've got to do to make anything else you want happen.
Yeah. And I think, and I sometimes ponder on that, like why I sometimes, somebody picked me up on it in a podcast, like I was like, I think I used the phrase trust the universe or something like that. And like immediately said, oh, I know that's a cliche, but it had me thinking, like, why are some of these phrases so taboo, and why do we feel so conscious about using them, especially in a business context? And I think, you know, it's the sort of thing you might be able to say like in a church, say, but not and I think there's something about the business environments we've created for ourselves, like we're all part of this, that has those things those ideas be taboo, but back to this driving and control, you know, idea. Because the letting go, trust the universe, to have faith, you know, these sentiments are a little taboo because of the environments we create for ourselves in the workplace. And so there is a kind of re-embracing of what we sometimes consider to be like taboo or kind of quirky language I think that certainly I'm sort of speaking to myself here, that I've got to kind of integrate and say, no, this is it's actually, it's okay to use these phrases. And that's part of what we're talking about here.
And it seems like the business world and the corporate world is sort of more and more open to these ideas. I mean, Dr. Brene Brown has done a wonderful job of, right? We are really talking about vulnerability in the workspace. And of course, you know, in order to get people to talk about vulnerability, you usually have to first associate it with courage. And then people say, oh, it's the same thing as courage. Okay, I'll do that. But yeah, there do see growth mindset, I feel like, is really making its way, and the idea of letting go of validation, encouraging effort instead of results. So there is this expansion, I feel like, of the way in which we can talk in the business world, but it's still, as you say, it's still, you bump up against these phrases and ways of thinking. You're like, they're not ready for this yet. But then that's what a lot of, I think, this book and other books are about, is like, how can we translate these really fundamental things that make us human, that make us better, they make us more effective, they make the people around us more effective. How do we translate that so that everybody can hear us, even if they're not speaking some of that language yet?
Yeah, that's right. I think that's right, isn't there? There's a kind of judiciousness of using language that's important. And of course, the more I self-censor, the more I create that world. Like, it's both, right? And I've got to embrace all of these ideas and speak about them openly, and not have them be awkward for myself in order for them to not be awkward for others. That's right. Important.
Yeah, and that's a big part of our job, I think, is the ideas are the same, really. You know, the concepts that we're talking about, what makes us a better human in any context or environment, it's the same in the corporate world. We're just always trying to translate it so that they'll hear it and buy it and associate it with whatever outcomes they're working towards, right?
Yeah.
It's a funny thing. But yeah, so I think, Eve, as I think about these chapters and the recommendations that we make to embrace or nurture our authenticity and playfulness and all of these, all of it requires pausing, stopping, paying attention. What are we doing? What's the habitual way in which I'm going to respond to this? And do I want to do something a little bit different? You know, and as kids, we don't have any of those habits formed yet. We haven't put the whole world into boxes and compartments. You know, we haven't learned over and over again that this is a stupid question, or that we should be doing this instead of this, or that this is what this thing is for. Like, all of those things that just, in a sense, make us smaller.
Yeah.
We haven't learned any of that yet. So a lot of it is stopping and noticing all of the ways we've habituated ourselves to respond and move through the world. Say, this one's working great, but this one's not working so well.
Yeah. Stop and reflect. Yeah.
Daily.
And of course, again, that of course, you know, I don't know if you hear it with your clients, but everyone seems to be zoomed out, right? You know, it's 6-7 Zoom calls a day, and they're just, for all, I think there is space at kind of either at the end of the day for people in a different way now to reflect. I think during the day, people are finding that, we've still got that pace, you know, action orientation, you know, action. Even just when you said growth mindset, right? I think you're way in a way that growth mindset idea is a Trojan horse, because it's a term that's sort of amenable to the business community, right? Growth, let's grow more.
That's true. No, you're right.
But it's sort of that paradox, right? To grow, we have to stop. We do have to stop and pause and reflect, right? And that it's, how can we carve out time and just block out, you know, even on a practical level, like block time out in a day for this.
Yeah. And even to move a little bit slower through the day, even so that at the end of a meeting, you can say, did I show up to that the way that I wanted to show up? Or what happened there? Or like, check in with yourself. Like, how am I feeling right now? Like, we'll go from meeting to meeting to meeting. And by the end of the day, we're like anxious and a little bit annoyed. And we have all these things happening in our body. We don't know why, because we never stop to say, oh, the thing that happened that's making my adrenaline go, or the thing that happened that's making my cortisol rise, or the thing that is making me feel antsy, right? Is it me? Is it something I said? Is it something they said? Is it a feeling I have? Is it a responsibility that I don't want to have? Like, what is the thing that's happening that's making me feel this stress? And unless you can identify that, you can't do anything differently to mitigate it. So I also think one of the things about this Zoom world and going from thing to thing to thing, and then off like take care of our kid, and then go back to the Zoom, and then we got to get the meal, and then we got to get this thing done. And we're having all of these psychological, emotional, physical reactions. We don't even know what's what, right?
Yeah.
Or what's causing what, or what's frustrating us, or what's the, so it's just this mumbo jumbo of sort of bad, overwhelmed feelings that nobody knows what to do with. So as much as having like a chunk of time to reflect, I think it's about building in time throughout your day where you can just say, this is how I feel, and let me see if I can pinpoint why.
Yeah.
So that if I want to do something differently, or at least I can identify the source of my stress, so that I can know when I go into that meeting, this person's going to trigger me. So let me get myself ready. Right.
Prepare for the trigger. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And what relates to your earlier point about locus of control is like we sometimes, we can think, oh, but I must do this and I must do, but actually just stopping and pausing and saying, well, hang on, do I, taking control of my own diary and my own, and like really checking in, do I really have to do that?
Yes.
Could I skip that? Could I delegate that? Could I, and I think almost like, doing that and able to create the space so that you can go slower, and so that ultimately you can have more impact.
Exactly. And that, I think, is like leadership comes in a little bit there, because that needs to be modeled.
Yeah.
One thing I'm really struck by when I coach people that are coming up in an organization is how desperately they need role models. I mean, they really do need to see the thing modeled to understand what it is, whether it's good leadership or work-life balance, or what you're saying, sort of creating space, or how you delegate or say no. You have to see people around you also doing that to feel like you can do it, because culture is so strong. Right. So what is the culture telling you is okay and it's not okay? And is this culture telling me that unless I'm like, don't have time to use the bathroom during the day, I'm not working as hard as I can? Or is this culture encouraging me to slow down, take care of myself, take a pause, maybe say no to some things so that I can use my energy better? So I think leaders really have some responsibility to be doing that, so that other people see them doing it.
Yeah. And almost like, because something I hear a lot about people is, I've got lots of plates spinning, especially as you get more senior in an organization, and I've got to, like, it's my job to keep all these plates spinning. And often I'm saying, like, well, what if you just let a few crash? And that can be like horrifying, right, for some people. But it's back to your control thing. Oh yeah, but then what? And then it's back to this. Well, just take a leap of faith, right? Just take a leap of faith that either it's not going to matter that thing crashes, or that somebody else will pick it up.
Yes, that's right.
And that can be the hardest thing.
Maybe there's two plates where it's obviously you're not going to let those plates fall to the ground, but of the 10 plates spinning, there's got to be 2 that you can experiment and see what happens if they crash. Yeah. And just do and like, take that step out and then see what happens. And then, I mean, I had exactly that conversation with someone. Like, it's a little bit that thing we were talking about earlier. It's that worst case scenario thing of like, well, what is the worst thing that's going to happen here? Yeah. Testing that out a little bit. But I like, and also along those lines, what you said earlier about the giving permission, that all of these things, like if you go do that show, and as we experiment with bringing more of some of this language into the corporate space, it's all opening up permission for more of us to be broader and bigger and more diverse and more nuanced. One of the things John talks about in the curiosity chapter, I don't know, have you read the book Range by David Epstein? No. It's quite good. But he talks about this increasing need and all the evidence we have for the value of a broad range of experiences, skills, talents, we, in the corporate world, we've gotten pretty narrow. We get attached to expertise. And of course, there's a place for that. But in this volatile, complex, ambiguous world, where we're uncertain of what we're going to need or need to invent or come up with next, sort of broad range of experience, skills, knowledge is really useful. And it's really wonderful if you can be well versed in how to entertain a crowd, and also how to land a joke, and also how to coach somebody through a difficult business process, and also the believing in the value of having that broadness of range of skills. Again, then we model it for other people too. Like, you can come into this business and you can add value, and still nurture these 10 things about yourself. You don't have to choose, which I think more and more people want. I think the generations coming up want this more. So I think there's something really wonderful about what you're talking about, that, again, it's just another way that we give permission to others to be more fully realized and be more fully themselves when we do that too, when we pursue, more of what we want and love.
Right. We can say multitudes.
What can be done.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. We can say multitudes.
And like embrace all of them. And the quote, one of the quotes I wrote down from the book, and I actually posted it on LinkedIn. A jack of all trades is a master of none. And then that's what we leave it there, right? But then in the book, you made the point that, but the rest of that quote is, but oftentimes better than a master of one, right? A master of a jack of all trades might be better than a master of one, right? That's not something we discuss. And that's the point you're making.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, things are just so complex and interwoven these days. So multiple ways of looking at things and understanding things is clearly so valuable. Yeah.
And I think so, being that, because I read that quote and I'm like, oh, thank God, right? Because I've always been a gymnast. And I and that whole thing about mastery and like 10,000 hours, I'm like, oh God, I can't imagine spending 10 minutes on one thing, like that 10,000 hours, right? And so, or 100,000, whatever. And so, but yeah, that notion that actually just being pretty good at quite a lot of things might actually allow you to master some complex activity, because you've got just enough skill in a range of areas that actually allows you to be, more effective than, just being an expert in one.
Exactly. Yeah. And certainly for leadership, you can see how that would pay off, and that you can really understand the broadness of how all the pieces are going together better, and understanding what different people are doing, even if you don't understand every single detail, that you can sort of broadly understand how all these pieces fit together and create this outcome. Or and certainly for innovative ideas, innovation is very much, I think, dependent on our trust, our faith that we don't have to have one set of expertise.
Yeah, and I also think it's kind of closer to our humanity and how we evolved. If you think about it, if you go back to the environments we evolved in, we couldn't just be good at like growing carrots, right? We'd have had to have been good at like doing a bit of hunting and growing some vegetables and building the house, and and there would have been a whole bunch of different things that we'd have to be pretty good at, right? And it would have actually been pretty rare for someone to, has survived in a tribe through having only one skill. Yeah.
And then you have to adapt. If the world changes, something happens, being able to adapt. And if you're too locked into, but this is what I do and this is how I do it, which would certainly impact your resilience. Yes, I think getting to feel yourself be good at a variety of things, and also just trying different things. And, you think about growth mindset, and what growth mindset is meant to nurture is our willingness to be wrong. It's our willingness to fall off, to maybe not be the smartest person in the room sometimes, our willingness to try different things, put some effort in, even if we're not going to be the winner. And every corporation or business I'm in is encouraging that. Like, we need more people that are willing to try more things and don't need to be the smartest person in the room all the time. And so a lot of that has to do with doing it, just doing it and modeling it, which I guess is what we're talking about, like modeling. Oops, I tried that. That didn't work out so well. Let me try this. Let me play around with this thing over here and see how that goes.
Yeah. Have you got any stories from that in your own life recently, like stuff you played and failed at, or like had experiences of trying some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way, when you're facilitating groups and coaching individuals, there are little paths that I that I try. Sometimes they're all, let me drop this story and see how that goes, or even something like, the extent to which you share your own personal experience versus not. Yeah. I'm always kind of testing those things and what's working, what stories land, how much, what stories of mine land, what stories about the world land. The Zoom has created a lot of, trying to make a group work in Zoom and trying different things. And yes, and things have definitely clunked. The extent to which you maybe put people on the spot, it's all of these little, I'm sure there's bigger things, but I feel like my work, which I think is similar to yours, it requires a sort of constant experimentation. Oh, and one thing that I think is really important about experimenting with the way that you're doing things and whether it's working, how effective it is the ability to then reflect without punishing yourself, right? The ability to say, okay, that didn't work. Here's what I want to do differently next time, and move on. And sometimes I get trapped in, that didn't work. Why did I do that? I hate myself today. Right. And then you're like down in this other useless spiral that makes you not want to try something new again. And if you're punishing yourself every time it goes wrong, it makes you less brave. It makes you, I don't want to feel like this again, so I'm just going to play it safe. I'm just going to do what I know what works. So the ability to kind of reflect and self-assess and say, oh, didn't like that. Okay. And this is almost where the playfulness comes in, right? Let me just be light and playful with myself. That was terrible. Congratulations, Corena, for trying that. Tomorrow you're going to do this. Now I'm going to go make myself a nice cup of something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like being able to self-talk, right? And I think I saw a study I think they did it with kids where kids were trying to learn, I think, to carry a bucket of water, like, between 2 points. And they found that the kids whose skill acquisition was quicker, the main determinant of like speed of skill acquisition was actually the internal monologue. The kids who were like, the bucket spilt, who cares? Or, maybe there's something wrong with the bucket, right? Those kids who never laid it on themselves acquired skills much more quickly than the kids who were like, oh shit, how am I going to do it right? I need to do, who were in an internal monologue about all the things they'd done wrong. They didn't acquire the skills so quickly. I
love that. There is a little bit about that in the resilience chapter. That sort of ability to quickly be like, that's a thing that's not me. That's this circumstance or situation.
Yeah,
but
and of course and there's an interesting paradox there because, of course, then when it comes to mastery, there is a need to have like total self ownership. So like you've got to be able to do both things. You've got to take full responsibility and not beat yourself up. It's
a delicate balance. It's very hard being human, which is why you have this podcast, because we have to talk about it a lot to get it. There's a lot of talking about being human. It's forever. It's forever work to find the balance that works best. But oh man, is our self-talk important? Yeah.
And you were mentioning stories there, and there's one story you share in the book about your niece. Is that in the authenticity chapter? Is it worth just sharing that now?
it's a sweet little story. She's 3 years old and we're walking down the street and her brazen, we'd had ice cream. She sees two ladies having ice cream cones and she's just delighted about, oh, we just had ice cream too. What flavor you have? What flavor is that? And it gets in this conversation. They say, oh, chocolate chip. And they try to walk on. Oh, my name's Adeline. What's your name? And she says the name. And then and what's your name to the older lady? And that lady says, my name's Grammy. I'm her Grammy. And Adeline flips out. My niece just, that's my Grammy. You guys are twins. Her name is Grammy too. And the just going from these grown-ups just kind of minding their business to just all of us on the street together, laughing, enjoying this energy that this 3-year-old brought to us. To me, it was just such a reminder of what we all have the potential and power to do for each other every day, which is just bring that was just her authenticity. It was her delight. It was her desire to connect, her curiosity, right? All of those things made her just stop. And she literally put her body in front of them and made them stop walking, so that she could talk to them and ask them questions and then find a common connection and then delight in the connection. And, of course, with that, none of us are going to do quite that thing, but we have the potential to do that thing every day for each other, to change a moment, to change a dynamic, to change the energy with our curiosity, with our wonder, by being willing to be a little bit more of our delighted selves. That's kind of what that story was about. Was how many times a day are we choosing not to do that? And when is there an opportunity to do it that we could maybe make a different choice and do it?
Yeah, I love that. That's so. Yeah, how can we delight people? That's a great. Yeah, how can I delight people?
Curiosity is a great way to unleash that. What are you wondering about? What can you ask somebody? What can you dig into? Where is your curiosity and wonder taking you? It's so fun to see a grown-up go, to be delighted or surprised by something. We go through our days. It's like some of us go through our days and we're never, ever surprised by anything. And that's why we love kids. Because if you've got, you've got those 4-year-olds, right? Probably they bring you something surprising every day.
Yeah, like I love one of them loves dogs, and he'll always just exactly as you described it, Lisa, was just stand in front of someone who's walking their dog, like stand in the middle of the pavement, the path, and be like, "What's your dog called? Who are you called? How old's the dog? How old are you? What colour's your bedroom?" Right? Yeah, it's just all there. And of course, it just immediately calls. Well, for the vast majority of people, it causes them, delight, and they love it. And of course, some of them are so shocked. They're so. And I know this is judgmental, but my story about them is that they're so kind of cocooned, right? Kind of in their own ego that they just can't respond. And I think that's the process over time that can happen to people, right?
That's right. Yeah, and again, we don't have to jump in front of people. But how can we test? What's the grown-up version of that? What's the way in which we can test? And maybe somebody that appears to be sort of shut off or cocooned is just waiting for someone to crack the edges of that. And what are the ways that we can test that? Yeah. I mean, it's a great contribution to the world, really, if you can, help put a little crack in some of those cocoons for people that are actually, probably actually craving connection, but don't quite know how to do it. I think for those of us that do know how to do it and are a little bit more comfortable creating that connection, it's kind of our job, to find ways to get to more humans that. That's a
good thought, actually, because sometimes I'm just sort of looking at myself. Yeah, sometimes I'll just write people off and be like, I can't connect. It's just sort of forget it. But yeah, of course, there probably is always a way, right? There's always a way of finding that chink and that way in if we persist. Yeah.
And it's one of the ways that we can be surprised, I think, as grown-ups is when we get through to people that we don't think we can get through to, or realizing that somebody is so much more thoughtful or interesting than we thought they were.
Yeah, and it just reminds me of a story I think I've shared on this podcast before, but there was one person that was working with the company, and there was one person in this team who we just couldn't engage in anything, just didn't want to do it. You just didn't want to engage in anything. And this went on for about a year, basically, best part of a year, and then we this is a great example of what you're talking about. And we tried Lego serious play, the technique we get people playing with Lego, and we built this model of what the future might be, and everyone was playing with models. And this woman produced the most wonderful model, like this ornate Lego model. And I can still remember details of it. She put an owl on the top of one of the turrets of this one. And this was like several years ago. And she just totally came alive in this excellent exercise. She built it, and then she was able to talk about it and really evolve. Yeah, and that was being playful. I mean, we didn't design this to try and get her engaged. It just happened that way. But that all came out of, a bit of courage for me to say, well, let's just try on this like Lego technique with this group. And certainly like the playfulness and the curiosity, is this going to work? And then everyone getting involved. And then, we got this contribution, and it was a great contribution from this woman. No other way have we found to engage her. Yeah.
It's a wonderful example. And play is the thing that unleashed her.
Yeah.
A little bit, which might have been the last thing you would expect for her.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It was, and
it's one of my favorite things about this profession, I think, is being surprised by people. And when you do reach somebody or get through to, see somebody open up or have a realization, or just being surprised, just having an idea about who somebody is and what they're capable of, and you think you've got their number, and then they just surprise you. We need that. I really think grownups need to be surprised by each other regularly, or we just get too many ideas about all the boxes that we've put people in. We get sort of affirmed that, oh yeah, all my boxes and files are correct. This is where everybody goes. Right. We just need to have those busted up.
Yeah. Like just let go of that story. Yeah. Like, cause we all end up with little stories about everyone in their lives. Like, this person's like that. She's like that. He's like this. Yeah.
Exactly.
Letting go of those and just like staying in wonder, staying in curiosity, staying playful. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the life's, in some ways that's a lifetime's work. But so it's what you're pointing to, it seems.
I think it's all lifetime work. And, and finding ways to make that lifetime work not feel daunting, which is why the course self-talk thing is so important. It's like, how can we play around with these things and talk to ourselves and experiment in ways that keep us able to work on these things without shutting down or exhausting ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, of course, is once you're in this, the more I can stay in a state of wonder, the more nothing's exhausting, right? Just life energizes me.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that there's sort of the great yogis and so on, through history, or great sages seem to have boundless energy. And I think that's part of it. It's just like every moment is something to cherish. It's Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many ways and frameworks to think about these things, but hopefully, the book is focused on superpowers, which is kind of fun. Right. We wanted it to be, it's focused on kids, which are fun, and it's focused on superpowers and superheroes, which I know is very American. But hopefully that makes it just sort of, to your point about language and what we can process and what feels usable. I think it's a fun read and pretty accessible in terms of just some tools and some things you can try. That will hopefully unleash these qualities in ourselves.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. It's accessible. It's fun. There are some science. And of course it's illustrated as well. You've got some cartoons in there. Some
little cartoons. Because if you're going to write a book about superheroes, you got to put some comic strips in there.
Yeah. So it's great. Okay. Is there anything we've missed? Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we've not explored?
No, I just wanted to be in conversation about the book and the concepts in the books. And it's been super fun to share some of these ideas with you. And I really appreciate it. I appreciate the conversation and the time. I hope everybody can I don't know. The playfulness is what's in my mind right now, is like maybe just move. It's the beginning of my day. So I'm just thinking I want to go into this day and sort of be more playful with the way that I approach people and things. And it really feels like even just that intention of I'm going to be a little lighter and more playful today could absolutely change what a day feels like.
Yeah. Well, touche. Okay. Well, that sounds like a great message to end on. So, Corena, thank you so much. We'll put a link to the book and to what's the name of the JM Read group, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll also link out to that for people who want to connect with you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
All right. What a great way to start the day. I really appreciate being with you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, although I think yours is almost over.
Yeah. Well, no, we've just passed lunchtime. So yeah, I've still got
okay. All right.
an afternoon.
Math is not my forte. I'm good at other things. Yeah, 6 hours. Okay.
So yeah, I've still got plenty of adventures, including getting my boys to bed, which is always playful.
Yeah, I know all about that bedtime routine. Yeah, more playful than we want usually.
Good. All right. Well, thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. What a pleasure to be with you. All right.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye.
Well, thank you.